And God bless Michele Bachmann. Let's get right to it with our panel this afternoon. From Minneapolis, Anna Marie Cox, correspondent for The Guardian, and Melissa Harris Perry is a professor of political science at Tulane and columnist for The Nation, as well as a highly esteemed MSNBC contributor. Welcome to both of you. Melissa, I'd like to start with you. Some in the Michele Bachmann camp are suggesting sexism may have been at play here in her poor performance in Iowa. And it's true, isn't it, that in many of the evangelical churches, women are not allowed to take leadership positions, and that may have affected the willingness of the electorate to support her?
Possibly. I mean, I will say this. There are more women leaders of various forms in evangelical churches than, say, for example, in Catholic churches. Particularly, for example, in the black evangelical tradition, you often have women who become even preachers, but obviously, you know, Catholic women cannot become priests, for example. So I think we want to be really careful on the sexism question. There's been a great deal of really smart research that suggests one of the things that really impacts women as candidates is simply that women end up not running. They don't get, no one asks them to run. They don't think of running as an option. They, you know, often will have very good resumes, but not actually make the decision to throw their hats in the ring. And none of that is true for Michele Bachmann. Obviously, she's an office holder. She made the choice to run. And despite whatever her resume looked like, she certainly felt that she was as qualified as the other men against whom she was running. I think that her losing in this cycle was so overdetermined by so many different factors that although gender may have been part of it, it's really hard to tease out what aspect gender played.
So, Melissa, are you saying that it was basically because her policies were hopeless and no one wanted them?
No, I think it's more that you know, all of their policies seem to be hopeless, but she peaked really early in the hopeless policy cycle. So she came up and won the Ames straw poll. She just, you know, 6 more months or maybe even 3 more months, she would have come back around as the not Mitt candidate, potentially.
Indeed. Anna Marie, Rick Perry made it sound like he was going to bow out, and later then he said he is going to be heading to South Carolina. But perhaps, you know, we should be thrilled that he's going to be taking part in these forthcoming debates, because, as you know, he's been quite the star performer so far. But isn't this a dangerous roll of the dice for him? I mean, poor chap. I mean, he may forget again and then be in real trouble.
Well, obviously, it's all great news for us who cover these things. The longer that any of these candidates stay in, the more fun it is. I really felt blessed last night with the results. It turns out that there is a God, and he has a great sense of humor, at least when it comes to comedy writing about politics. So if that's the case, I mean, obviously, Rick Perry will stay in. I think it makes sense for him to stay in, actually. I mean, he could come up again. As Melissa was saying, there's sort of a cycle here I think we might be seeing with the non-Romney candidates, because this is a non-Romney race in many ways. I think Santorum lucked out to have his moment in Iowa. And Rick Perry really is, on paper, a candidate that could do very well in trying to compete against Romney. He has an evangelical background. He has a background that he can talk about as far as creating jobs. I mean, we can talk about whether or not Texas is really a model we want the country to follow. But he can make that argument. So, I mean, it makes sense for him to stay in. He also, all importantly, still has money to spend.
He has plenty of money. Melissa, this entire program, and we've been on air now for about 35 minutes, we haven't mentioned Ron Paul, who finished third last night. Why is that?
I know, it's poor Ron Paul. I mean, I think it's possible he could win the presidency and be standing at the inauguration by himself, and all of us in media would be over, you know, covering something else. Look, part of it is because if there is one truth in the American political system, it is that congressmen do not become presidents. Our presidents are either senators or governors. It's almost inconceivable that someone who's never won a statewide election would actually go on to win the U.S. presidency, and particularly someone with Ron Paul's kind of libertarian views. But what is going to be so much fun going forward is that there was just enough win for everybody and just enough ire on the part of Gingrich that Gingrich and Paul will stay in and just beat up on Romney, and then the whole kind of evangelical crew, short Michele Bachmann now, are going to beat up on each other and steal some votes. And so this is not going to wrap for a while. And as Anna was saying,
this is
that
fantastic.
Is good for all of us.
Anna Marie, I'm wondering whether WWF or WWE should actually sponsor this, because it's going to be a bloodbath, isn't it, going forward?
It is. Newt, I think, is going to be the battering ram against both Romney and basically everyone else, too. I am happy to have the excuse that I'm not going to get nasty. I'm just going to tell the truth from here on out. That's a great line, and I think we all should use it. And it is going to be fun. This is going to last for a while. I'm not sure if it's going to be fun for the candidates, except for Newt. I think he likes getting down and dirty.
But Anna Marie, on Ron Paul going forward, what are his prospects? Because he didn't do as well as he thought he would in Iowa, and I guess that spells negatively for his place going forward.
Well, I mean, let's be honest. He is unlikely to become the nominee, but I think his strong showing in Iowa and his steady showing in Iowa, he's really the only candidate in Iowa that never really slipped. He was on a constant forward motion in Iowa until the very end. And obviously he has some, not really skeletons in his closet, but he has some unpleasantness in his closet that people don't really like very much. But clearly there is something about his message that people really respond to in this cycle. I think it has to do with his honesty about who he is. And I think that Santorum sort of resonates with people that same way. So I think Ron Paul will probably stick around for longer than maybe the media would like.
Melissa,
it does seem that...
Melissa, Anna Marie says that it's his message that resonates. Very briefly, is it that message that he wants to basically be isolationist as far as foreign policy is concerned, and he'd like to legalize heroin? Yeah,
look, this is a hard one for me. I mean, on the one hand, you know, I do think he has an interesting and smart message around how bad the drug wars have been for ordinary people, how troubling our entrance into the war in Iraq was. But obviously, his isolationism is deeply problematic. And look, the fact that that when he talks about the Civil War, he talks about if we just bought the slaves, we wouldn't have had to fight the Civil War, and other things that emerge in those newsletters that I think still have not been sufficiently accounted for. He just doesn't give me any warm, fuzzy feelings of honesty, quite honestly.
Melissa Harris Perry and Anna Marie Cox, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mark.
And a reminder that this Sunday, David Gregory will moderate the final presidential debate before the New Hampshire primary. The NBC News Facebook debate will air on a special edition of NBC's Meet the Press and also on MSNBC at 9 a.m. Eastern Sunday. Don't miss it. Next, are these GOP candidates off base on Iran? Stay with us.
I would say to every foreign scientist that's going into Iran to help them with their program, you will be treated as an enemy combatant, like an al-Qaeda member. And then finally, I would be working openly with the state of Israel, and I would be saying to the Iranians, you either open up those facilities, you begin to dismantle them and make them available to inspectors, or we will degrade those facilities through airstrikes.